Okay, good evening, everybody. Tonight's Wednesday night. That means it's Halacha and Tanya. Last time began the dinim of what's called Yayin Nesech, which is wine that was actually poured for idol worshiping. That is forbidden not only to eat, but even to benefit from. And then you have more practical in today's world is what's called Stam Yenom. Stam Yenom means wine that was opened, touched by a non-Jew. In other words, if it's a sealed bottle, with the cap and this plastic, the seal around it, there's no problem with the guy even touching the bottle. There's no issue with it. If the bottle was opened and somebody touched it, a non-Jew touched it, so then you can't drink it. And according to many opinions, you can't even benefit from it either. Like somebody just asked me this week, last night it was, he had a very expensive bottle of non-Bushel wine he put it away somewhere. And the housekeeper was cleaning up and picked up the bottle and cleaned up, put it back. I said, you have a problem. Because the non-Jew touched the wine. It was open bottle of non-Bushel wine. Now, why is the law of a non-Jew touching, why doesn't that apply if wine is mavushel, if wine is cooked? So we mentioned briefly last week that wine that was cooked was not allowed to be used for the mizbeach. When they used to do the wine libations, when people brought sacrifices, they were not allowed to use wine that was cooked. The reason why wine was cooked, it was not kosher for the mizbeach, because it's not preferred, it's not premier wine. Premier wine is wine that's, even the very expensive kosher wines today are really not mavushel, because the cooking process takes away the goodness of the wine. So therefore, when the Chacham said about a non-Jew touching it, they said, we're only wine that was good on the mizbeach, meaning non-mavushel wine. But if wine is mavushel, then it's not a problem. That explains, by the way, why you have at weddings, bar mitzvahs, you have waiters, non-Jewish waiters, pouring cups of wine for everybody during the meal. The reason all that wine is mavushel, because it's all mavushel. So then it's not a problem if the guy touches the bottle of wine or not. Now, there's a big argument in halacha. What is considered mavushel? Okay. Now, normally, when we speak about cooked, okay, when something is cooking and for kashering or even just cooking process, it's when it gets to 212 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. Okay, that's what considered boiling. At sea level, 212 degrees. Well, alcohol, because of the alcoholic content, alcohol boils at 190 approximately. But now there's a very big question. It applies to grape juice, applies to a lot of pasteurized wines. A lot of wines, especially Israeli wines, are pasteurized. Grape juice, you'll always find pasteurized. Now, pasteurization doesn't get up to 190. It really gets up to 180. So now there's a big argument between the Moshe Feinstein, the Tzalem Rav, what is considered mavushel for wine? Is pasteurization of wine considered mavushel? Some opinions say yes, some opinions say no. Some grape juices, by the way, with very good hechsherim, say on it mavushel. So then it's probably, the assumption is not only just pasteurized, is actually also cooked to a higher degree than, so many of the Israeli wines, by the way, the hechsher of the wine relies that it's mavushel based on pasteurization. It's impossible to know really which wines are what. But I'm just mentioning that there are many opinions that say if it's pasteurized, it's considered mavushel. Some people say if it's not, even if it's pasteurized, if it doesn't hit for alcohol 190, or for grape juice, which is really not alcoholic, reaches 212, it's not considered mavushel. And again, there's different opinions about these things. Some people are machmir, some people are lenient. We also mentioned last week, and this will go, then we'll move on to the next din, and that is, according to Kabbalah, we mentioned last week that if a guy just looks at wine that's open, not a sealed bottle of wine, that's not an issue. If a non-Jew looks at an open bottle of non-mavushal wine, the din is you're allowed to drink it. There's no question you didn't touch it, you're allowed to drink it. The only question is about making kiddush and havdalah and those things over that type of wine. And according to Kabbalah, it says that if a non-Jew sees an open bottle of wine, it's 100% good to drink because they didn't touch it. But the custom is you don't make kiddush or havdalah or something like that if it's if even if a guy looks at it, if it's not mavushal. Now the question is like this: what happens? Somebody's just posting a question. What happens as a non-observant Jew touches the wine? Many times you have guests at your table, you have family members, they're not religious yet. Mitzvah Shem, they will become, they're not religious yet, and you're serving wine at the table. So there's no question, and that's why Chabad houses, generally speaking, where they get a lot of non-religious people coming, they always serve mavushal wine. Okay? If somebody is home and somebody brings them a bottle of non-mavushal wine, and they want you to use it, and you're going to open it. So the din is, again, with the premise that we learned already a while ago, that Machalu Shabbos, which has a din of a goy, means when he knows all about Shabbos, and he yet openly, publicly desecrates Shabbos, and he doesn't care, and so on and so forth. Today's people, we learned, are what's called Tinik Shenishba, a child that was raised and captured by Goyim and raised amongst non-Jews. So when they don't keep Shabbos, it's not that they're a Mechalol Shabbos. They're not a person desecrating Shabbos. They just don't know better. So then many people are lenient even if they touch your wine. But again, when it comes to wine, people like to be more machmir. And if they know they're having non-religious guests at the table, they will make sure to have only a mavushal. What do you do if somebody brings you a bottle of non-mavushal wine and he wants you to serve it? So the best thing would be if the host pours everybody wine, rather than touching it. Them looking at it for sure is not an issue. If the host will go around pouring the wine in everybody's glasses, so then it's also not a problem. Or if that's not going to happen, the host can pour himself a cup of wine that he poured himself, and then he could give it to the other people to drink, and then that's their business, what they do. And he has his cup of wine that wasn't touched by the non-Jew. They tell a funny story. In Russia, the Rebbe spoke about this many times. In Russia, there are many Jews that weren't able to pass the test of not marrying non-Jews, but not marrying. They couldn't do it. They tell a story. There was a guy in his house making kiddush on Friday night, and there's some bachrim, or young guys from the yeshiva, and they see the husband is making kiddush, and he's covering the wine with his hand. He's covering the wine that his wife shouldn't see the wine. So somebody said to him, "Why are you covering the wine?" He said, "Because my wife's not Jewish." So he didn't want his non-Jewish wife to see the wine that he's making kiddush over. It's funny and it's not funny. Anyway, that's basically it as far as the wine and the grape juice and the mavushal and all that. Okay, next dinim over here that we're going to learn in Kitzur are the dinim of brachos. What constitutes bread? Meaning, what constitutes something which is hametzi, and what constitutes something which is the bracha of mezonot? Where do you have the two things? So the din is as follows: flour from one of the 5 grains. Now, one of the 5 grains is wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt. Okay, those are the 5 grains that the Torah speaks about. The Torah mentions chita useira, 2 of them, wheat and barley, and the other 3 are offshoots of wheat and barley. Those are considered the 5 grains according to halacha. If somebody takes flour from those grains and mixes it with water and bakes it, it is hametzi. If somebody takes flour and water and cooks it, it is mezonot. Okay? Because when you cook flour and water, it can never become bread, which is hametzi. So again, in order to be classified as hametzi bread that you have to wash, make hametzi and bench, it's flour of one of the 5 grains, wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt, mixed with water and baked. If it's not made into a flour, okay, it's not mezonot. Now, when you're talking about making it into a flour, that is not necessarily what the government classifies as flour. For instance, Ezekiel bread, they advertise as flourless bread. Okay, I don't want to go into the whole way it's made and everything. They say it's flourless bread, but with the way that bread is made, it is halachically flour, and therefore an Ezekiel bread, you have to make hametzi. When it first came out, because people said it was flourless, people didn't know exactly how it's made. So they were saying that it might be shahakol, it might be adama. If there's pieces, it's adama. If not, it's shahakol. But the bottom line is Ezekiel breads, for instance, are made, even though it says flourless, it's halachic flour, and therefore, because they're made with flour and water, Ezekiel breads are a hametzi, without any question. Number one, if something is made with, and again, if it's flour and water cooked, it's mezonot. If you have flour and juice, now juice means anything not water, oil, juice, eggs. Okay, those are the most common things people use. Eggs, oil, juice. If it's made with flour and juice, technically it's mezonot. Technical and practical halacha today, and I'll discuss what I mean by that soon. That's a mezonot because it's not flour and water. What happens if you have flour together with water, together with juice, or eggs, or oil? Then the din is, if 51%, at least 51% of the liquid content is water, then it's hametzi. If 51% content of the mixture is other liquids, not water, then it's a mezonot. What?
Repeat that one more time, please.
Okay, if it's 51% water, the liquid content, which includes water, eggs, oil, whatever. If it's 51% of the liquid content is water, it's hametzi. If it's 51% other juices, then out. Now, what people have to be very careful about is as follows. You have orange juice and apple juice from concentrate. You have apple juice, orange juice from you see on the bottle, it says from concentrate. That is similar to when you buy frozen orange juice or frozen apple juice. You empty out the can and that they tell you to add 3 times the amount of the can, 3 cans of water, and then you have the apple juice and the orange juice. Now, concentrated orange juice and apple juice, or any juice for that matter, is as follows. When they make the juice, I'm just telling you practical to understand how we'll do the concept of it. Concentrate juice that you buy in the store is as follows. When they made the juice, they squeeze the oranges. Then the concentrating process removes all the water from the juice. Then they ship it. And then when it gets to the destination, they add water into it. That's why it's called from concentrate. They take out the water. It's like the frozen orange juice, the frozen apple juice. You have a concentrated that they took out the water from it. And now when you're going to make it, you add water. The company adds water, and therefore it's from concentrate. Halachically, that is 3/4 water and 1/4 juice. So you have to keep that in mind. If you're going to bake a cake using orange juice or apple juice from concentrate, you have to consider the orange juice. You put in, let's say, a cup of orange juice. You have to consider 3/4 of it water and 1/4 of it juice. Now, if you use the not concentrated orange juice or apple juice, so then the whole thing is called juice. And people aren't aware of this. It's very important then to realize that, again, if it's concentrated juice, you have to consider it halachically 3/4 water and 1/4 juice. And then that can matter if it's going to be hametzi or mezenis is definitely going to matter. Okay? Now, what happens if it's not flour? For instance, some cereals, it doesn't say oat flour, wheat flour. It says whole grain oats, whole grain wheat. That is not flour. And then many times the cereal would be hadama, maybe even shahako. But if it's not flour, whole grain doesn't mean flour. Whole grain means whole grain. It's not flour. If it would be flour in the ingredients, it would say wheat flour, oat flour, this flour, that flour. Okay? That's another thing to keep in mind. Then it would not be hametzi or mezenis. It would probably be hadama. Now, what happens if somebody is baking something? They're baking something, and the majority is juice, so then it's mezenis. Majority water, again, it's hametzi. Now, sometime, I know what I wanted to say. What happens if you have ingredients of rice flour, soy flour, quinoa flour, I don't know, whatever it is. Or the most practical case would be potato starch, which is, by the way, potato flour. Potato starch that people use on Pesach is potato flour. Now, if it's potato flour, rice flour, any flour that's not from the 5 grains, that cake is going to be shahako. Okay, because again, if it's not from the 5 grains, it's not mezenis and it's not shahako. I mean, it's not mezenis, it's not hametzi. What would it be? Then it would be shahako, because the grains are all crumbled up, and therefore then it wouldn't be even adama. It would be a shahako. So, for instance, on all the Pesach cakes that people eat that are made from potato starch, the bracha is shahako, not mezenis. If you make a mezenis on it, you're not yetza. You didn't make the right bracha on the food. Now, what happens if you have, and many times people do this, they have wheat flour, rice flour, and other flours, a whole bunch of flours mixed together. What is the bracha on that cake or bread? So the din is, if the mezenis flour, meaning if the oat flour, wheat flour, 5-grain flour, rye flour, whatever, is put in the mixture in order to give taste, that becomes primary, and the halacha is a tametzi or mezenis. So even if you have a cake or bread made with wheat flour, oat flour, and other flours, if the wheat flour, oat flour, rye flour, spelt flour, by the way, it would be mixed in for taste also, even though it's not the majority of the flour content, it would still be hametzi if it's with water, and mezenis if it's made with bread, and with juice. Okay, now, what's the story with gluten-free fruit? Sometimes say wheat flour too, is that shahako? Okay, now, by the way, all the gluten-free things, most of them will not say wheat flour. Most of them will say, because wheat is not gluten-free, but sometimes they'll say oat flour, because oat, I think, is a little bit officially gluten-free. Yeah, no, I don't know. But they'll say gluten-free, and they'll still write oat flour. Then it's still mezenis or hametzi. If there's oat flour, again, any of those flours, even if it says gluten-free, it doesn't matter if it's gluten-free or not. If there's oat flour, rye flour, spelt flour, barley flour, and the other one, any of those, and they're there for taste, that becomes primary, and it becomes hametzi or mezenis. Now, let's discuss something called Mezonot bread. You go to in New York, it's very, very common. In LA, the Rabbonim stopped it, but they're doing it anyway. What happens? You have a Mezonot bagel. What's a Mezonot bagel by definition? Why is it Mezonot bagel? Because it's not made with water, it's made with juice. Okay, so therefore it's flour and juice, so therefore it's Mezonot. But that in halacha, according to one opinion, is called pas haba b'kislin. There's there's an expression in Chazal like this: pas haba b'kislin, whatever that means. Pas haba b'kislin, like a kiss or pocket, is mezonot, and then the Mishnah says if you are kaveh suda, you establish a meal on it, that becomes hametzi, even though it's mezonot. Now, which means if somebody will eat a lot of cake, I'm not talking about pourable batters, sponge cake, certain cakes which you pour the batter and then you bake it, it's pourable, that is always mezonot. That can never become hametzi. But if you're eating a Danish, okay, and the Danish is mezonot because it's not made with water, it's made with juice. We're soon going to discuss, if you eat a lot of it, you have to wash and bench on it. Sometimes you have to wash and bench on that itself. Sometimes you have to wash and bench on other bread. It's not so simple. Which means like this. I'm going to say what the halacha says, and we'll continue explaining it. I don't know how much we're going to get to today, but if not, we'll continue Mitzvah Shem next week. If somebody eats 12 ounces of this cake, and I'm talking about Mezonot bagel, is called cake because it's flour and juice, okay? You eat 12 ounces or more, and if you're full, you make hametzi and bench. Yeah, but I'm going to tell you that it's not so much. 12 ounces, okay? 12 ounces is 3/4 of a pound. Okay, it's less than a pound. If you eat that, you wash and bench on itself. If you're not full, that means you got a big stomach. You're not full, you have to wash and bench on other bread. You can't eat that. You have to wash and bench on other bread. Now, what happens if you eat less than 12 ounces? Okay, less than 12 ounces. If you're not full, it's mezonot. If you're full and you ate at least 8 ounces of the cake, then you have to wash and bench on that, which is a half a pound, 8 ounces. Then you have to wash and bench on that cake itself, if you're full. If you're not full, it's mezonos. Okay? What happens if you eat less than 8 ounces? And you're full, then you have to wash and bench another bread. Now, let me tell you a din, which is very apropos to what we're talking about. The din is, let's say you go to a bris, okay? And they serve mezonos bagels. But you load up your plate like Jews know how to, okay? And they eat the mezonos bagel with everything else. And they get full, not only from the bagel, they get full from everything else that they're eating. Then they have to wash and bench and other bread. You can't eat the bagel as a mezonos bagel, because that's already called establishing a meal. And if you establish a meal, that becomes bread. Which means, and you have to keep in mind, if you're eating lox and there's eggs and tuna, whole full plate of food, and you're getting full, even though you're not getting full from the bagel itself, but you're getting full from the accompaniment with the bagel, then again, if it's 8 ounces, you have to wash and bench on it. If not, you have to wash and bench on anything, something else. You can't just make a mezonos on the bagel. The bigger halachic problem really is, because it's a sudas mitzvah, that itself gives it prominence. That itself might consider it a proper established meal. So it's not so simple, okay, why it's allowed at a bris to serve mezonos bagels and people fill themselves up and they're mamish full, and you can't get away with mezonos. You're going to have to wash and bench another bread and then make sure, that's what it is. Now let's take it another step further. We have 2 minutes and I'll try to mention this and then we'll discuss it more next week. Pizza. Okay? Pizza could be made, the dough could be made with flour and water. It could be made with flour and juice. Okay, you have always, you see on the frozen pizzas, berchase mezonos. The bracha of the pizza is mezonos. Why is it mezonos? You look in the ingredients, the dough is made from flour and juice. Okay, so now you're going to the pizza shop for dinner, and you're going to be ordering pizza. And they tell you the pizza is mezonos. That's not necessarily true. If you eat, I'll give you an example, 3 slices of pizza, and you get full, depending if the 3 slices are 8 ounces, it's not a lot, 8 ounces, okay? It's like 8 slices of rye bread, okay, whatever it is. But if you go to the pizza store, okay, if you go to a pizza store to have a mezonos pizza and you get full for dinner at that pizza, then even if it's less than 8 ounces, you have to wash and bench another bread. So mezonos is not going to help you. So somebody asked, why on the airlines do they serve mezonos rolls? And you should know that in America, initially, the TV dinners would have mezonos rolls, and Rabbonim stopped it. And now they don't serve food anymore anyway. But when they used to serve food on the airplanes, the TV dinners, they would not put mezonos rolls in there anymore. They would write, the mezonos roll is a meitzi. If you're not able to wash, please don't eat it. What El Al does in Israel, I can't be responsible for. I can't be responsible for what I do either, but for sure not what El Al does. But it's not such a simple thing. If you eat pizza and you get full from the pizza with the cheese on it, according to the Alter Rebbe, You either have to wash and bench on that pizza itself, or you have to wash and bench another bread. If you eat a slice of pizza, Mezonot pizza, and you're not full, yeah, then it's Mezonot. But if you can eat a few slices of pizza for dinner and you're going to get full, it's either the pizza itself is amazing, or you have to wash and bench another bread, and you cannot make a Mezonot on it. Okay, let's go to Tanya.